Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March meeting of Indivisible Naperville. I'm Diane McGuire, and along with Nancy Turner and our amazing Indivisible leadership team, we have been striving over the last 4 years to provide opportunities for civic engagement on topics we think they're of great interest to our supporters. And we've also provided many opportunities for candidates for various offices to come before us and to make their case. And we've also, and this evening, we're going to do that again with our fifth and final candidate sampling for the upcoming election on April 6th. Now, our topic tonight, socialism, a smear or a path forward, will help us better understand both the history of the movement and its current evolution and its popularity, its really great appeal among many younger voters. But before we introduce our speakers, I would like to give one of our candidates who is unable to stay on our call an opportunity to speak right now for 2 minutes. Her name is Allison Fosdick, and she is running for the 204 Board of Education. Miss Allison?
Thank you, Diane. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak and accommodating my request to go early. I do appreciate it. My name is Allison Fosdick. I'm a Naperville resident of over 25 years. My husband and I have 4 children. The oldest is a district graduate, now at U of I. We have a high school sophomore, a 6th grader, and a 4th grader. So I've got my fingers in all the different pots of education right now. I work part-time as an English professor at Aurora University. And I feel really lucky to have time to be involved and invested in the community. I've most recently served as a PTA president at Springbrook Elementary, as an art awareness volunteer, as a PADS volunteer in the community, and I'm the current vice president of the Orchestra Parents Association at Neuqua Valley. Running for school board has been on my mind for quite some time. I did submit a letter of interest during the 2017 vacancy, and I was not selected at that time, but my interest has only grown since then. My kids have received exceptional educational opportunities here, and I'm committed to making sure that each district student receives what they need to succeed. If elected, I would like to focus first on equity, especially after this pandemic year. Second, on social emotional skills and hands-on tools to teach our kids how to better deal with life. And then finally, to work on increasing communication between the school district, families, and working together so that we can move forward collectively. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Allison. I will share with you that tomorrow, Indivisible Naperville will be making public its candidate recommendations. It's coming from the leadership team, so if you're a Facebook friend of ours, you might see that beginning tomorrow. We have several folks on the call, and I'm going to take just a moment. Judy Broadhead is on this call. Judy, can you wave? Say hello. She's an elected member of the Naperville City Council. Hi, Judy.
Hi, I'm eating dinner, so I'm going to show you my pretty picture instead of my real self.
Thank you, Judy. John Crummon, are you on the call yet? I think John is signed up. He's a current member of the Naperville City Council as well. Mimi Cowan, are you with us this evening? Mimi did sign up. She is a member of the Will County Board. And we have lots of our candidates who have already come before us. They are also on the call. But I'll just stay with the elected folks for now. I'm going to turn the program over now to 2 of our Indivisible Naperville leaders, Paulette Goodman and Lisa Rose, who will introduce our speakers for this evening. And we'll begin with Paulette. Unmute.
Mute. Aha, there we go. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Kim Addemir graduated from North Central with a double major in speech communications and philosophy last year. He was selected the 2020 Speech Communication Major of the Year and was also North Central College student commencement speaker. He competed at a very high level for forensics and debate teams and was recognized as one of the top student debaters in Illinois in his last year. He is currently a debate coach for Naperville Central High School. He remains very active in the Immigrant Solidarity page, where he is now, I believe, has an active, I'm not sure his actual role, but he's very much active in it. So let's welcome Kim Addemir.
Thank you. And let's move to Lisa now to interview Dr. Macek.
So Steve Macek is Professor of Communication and Chair of the Department of Communication and Media Studies at North Central College in Naperville, where he teaches courses on media studies and the First Amendment. He is the author of Urban Nightmares, The Media, the Right, and the Moral Panic Over the City, a critical analysis of media representations of American cities and the urban poor during the 1980s and 90s. His articles on Chicago's radical and alternative press have been published in AREA magazine and in the collection A Moment of Danger, Critical Studies in the History of U.S. Communication Since World War II. He has contributed chapters to several of Project Censored's recent yearbooks, Censored 2019, Censored 2020, and the State of the Free Press 2021. Dr. Macek writes frequently for non-scholarly audiences. His op-eds on media, politics, and communication policy and academic freedom issues have appeared in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the News and Observer, the Seattle Times, Truth Out, Common Dreams, and the Columbus Dispatch. He is currently working on 2 books, one about the history of film censorship in Chicago, Banned in Chicago, 8 Decades of Film Censorship in the Windy City, and one about the right-wing attack on higher education, clickbaiting the academy. And we'll begin with Dr. Macek.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Okay, Bev. Oh,
Okay, let me just say one thing. I'm going to make Steve, when he's presenting his slides, a host, and I will not be host. So people who wait in the waiting room, I won't be able to admit them. So we're not going to worry about that. We're going to make you a host, and you're going to start your presentation. Thank you, Steve.
all right, thank you so much. All right, let me just share my screen. Can everyone see that? Okay, fantastic. So Diane asked me to give a little presentation about socialism, what it is, what socialists stand for, and why it is that young people in particular are so interested in socialism today. And of course, I don't need to tell you that socialism is very much in the news, because it is often used, the term socialist is often used as an epithet by the right, by Republicans, to smear Democrats. In fact, most recently, Kevin McCarthy, right, minority leader, Republican minority leader in Congress, in the House, denounced the recently passed COVID relief bill, the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package, as socialist. So let's kind of look at what socialism is. And I want to start with just some basic definitions. I assume everyone has some image or idea of what socialism is, but I'm going to try to go over some very, very basic definitions. Then I will talk about some of the things that socialists have stood for over the years. I'll mention some of the famous Americans who have been or have considered themselves socialists. I'll give you a capsule history of socialism in the United States. And then I will talk about why I think socialism is making us a bit of a resurgence, all in just 17 minutes. So let me start with a definition. What is socialism? I think at its most basic, socialism is the philosophy or the view that the means of economic production, distribution, and exchange should be owned and democratically controlled by society as a whole for the benefit of all. Socialism, understood in this way, is the opposite, right, of capitalism, an economic system in which the means of production are privately owned and managed for the benefit of usually wealthy property owners, right? So in a nutshell, that's the philosophy of socialism. That's a very simplistic view, but it is, I think it's an accurate encapsulation of what socialists as a whole believe. And if you had to reduce it to a bumper sticker or a slogan, you could cite Karl Marx's famous statement from the Critique of the Goethe program, from each according to their ability to each according to their need. But socialism is more than just a political and economic philosophy. It is also, and probably more importantly, a movement, right? A movement of labor activists, civil rights activists, feminists, poor people, all fighting to realize, right, this philosophy. Sorry. So, well, that in a nutshell is sort of the definition of socialism. It's important to recognize that there are some very deep divisions and differences between various types of socialism. And I want to distinguish between some of the major sort of approaches to socialism or types of socialism. Sort of the earliest form of socialism, which dates from the 18th century, could be called utopian socialism. Sometimes it's called Owenite socialism after the 18th century British socialist Robert Owen. And this is the idea that workers and farmers and ordinary people can build towards a socialist society by forming cooperatives, worker-run businesses or farmer-run farms. And then, as more and more people witness the success of these businesses or these farms, they'll convert to the cause of socialism, gradually evolve towards socialism. Kind of the opposite of utopian or Owenite socialism is the form of socialism most people are probably most familiar with, which is associated with Karl Marx and the communist movement. And it's what you might call revolutionary socialism. It's the belief that a transition from capitalism to socialism is going to require a pretty intense militant struggle of the masses against the ruling class or the ruling elite, and that capitalism will have to be overthrown, probably by force, in a revolution that will be both economic and political, and that workers should build their own independent political organizations in order to pursue this sort of revolution. Sorry about that. So a kind of third variant of socialism is what we might call social democracy or reformist socialism. This is the view that socialism can be achieved via economic regulation and policy interventions designed to promote social justice in a kind of liberal democratic state and a capitalist mixed economy. And this is the term social democracy is often applied to the sort of social welfare states in Scandinavia. A final variant is what we might call democratic socialist, which are socialists that support a gradual parliamentary transition to socialism via radical reforms, and with the aim of realizing a fully socialist economy rather than a sort of mixed capitalist and public economy, coupled with multi-party democracy. And usually democratic socialists conceive of the socialist economy as sort of decentralized with at least some market elements. I think a very useful, if you want to look at a useful essay that lays out the distinctions between various types of socialism, I strongly encourage you to seek out Hal Draper's The Two Souls of Socialism. And in that article, he distinguishes, right, between socialism from above, which is people who believe that socialism will be realized by some sort of elites, whether they're the party vanguard or parliamentary leaders imposing socialism on society, from above, versus socialism from below, which he associates primarily with Marx and Marxism, where the idea is that socialism will be an achievement of workers, organizing themselves independently of government or of elites. Another way that socialists sort of differ from each other is over their conception of the socialist economy. Not all socialists envision the socialist economy in the same way. Some socialists think socialism means centralized planning and nationalization of most parts of the economy. Other socialists associate socialism with simply nationalizing and controlling the commanding heights of the economy, like transportation, communications, basic materials, and so forth. But other parts of the economy would not come under sort of direct democratic social control. And then finally, market socialists allow a huge role for markets in a socialist economy, kind of envisioning an economy made up of a lot of worker-run businesses and cooperatives, but interacting with each other, through some sort of market. Another way that socialists vary from each other, different strains of socialism vary, is through their attitudes toward electoral politics. There are some socialists who abstain entirely from electoral politics, who believe that socialism will be achieved mainly through struggles at the workplace carried out by labor unions. There are socialists who believe that socialists ought to have their own independent parties and should not take part in parties that contain or include capitalists, like, say, the Democratic Party. There are other socialists who believe that socialists should work both within and outside major parties, and then there are the entryists who believe in working within the Democratic Party, that in the United States, at least, the main place that socialists should exert their efforts is through working within the Democratic Party to move the Democratic Party in a socialist direction. And then, of course, I'm not going to get into this at all, but there's a lot of debates among socialists about attitudes towards what used to be called actually existing socialism, that is the Soviet Union and Soviet-style Stalinist socialist countries like the People's Republic of China, Cuba, Venezuela. Okay, so I want to move on to some of the causes and policies socialists have championed, because I think a lot of people have misconceptions about what socialists have stood for over the years. And most of what we consider valuable or progressive about contemporary American society or contemporary European society are policies that have been advocated for years by socialists. For example, universal suffrage. Now in Europe, the achievement of universal suffrage was largely the result of socialist parties and the socialist movement. They were the ones who fought for the franchise for everyone, including the franchise for women. Socialists in this country also fought for women's suffrage, for example, and for voting rights for African Americans. Socialists have fought for the right to organize labor unions. They've been leaders in in the fight for the right to organize. They've been leaders in free speech fights. They, of course, they started and began the movement for the 8-hour workday and have fought over the years in countries around the world for a shortened work week, for paid vacations. Socialists were the leading voice in the United States for child labor laws. And here I've included a little cartoon from the Chicago Daily Socialist, which was a daily socialist newspaper at the beginning of the 20th century here in Chicago, that is, is illustrating that, capitalism, showing the greedy capitalists standing on the prostate bodies of children, and you can see the little factory in the background with the billboard saying "Children wanted." Socialists were the ones who pushed for child labor laws in this country. Occupational health and safety laws, old age pensions, which we now call Social Security, unemployment insurance, minimum wage laws, universal health care, parental leave, free childcare, free education, K through 12 and higher education, public housing, publicly owned mass transit and public utilities. All of those are causes that socialists have fought for over the years, and they're usually the first party, right, to articulate this as a demand, and then other parties have taken these causes over and included them in their own platforms. Socialists have also, as a rule, opposed imperialism and imposed militarism, although not all socialists and communists have consistently supported these demands, and I could get into that if time permits. Socialists have also been staunch anti-racists and advocates for civil rights for racial and ethnic minorities, and staunch defenders of women's rights. I'm giving you a list here of a few famous American socialists. Upton Sinclair, the author of The Jungle, the first person to sort of expose the unsanitary conditions in the meatpacking industry, whose work inspired food purity laws. Margaret Sanger, birth control advocate. Helen Keller, disability rights activist. Crystal Eastman, the author of the Equal Rights Amendment. Albert Einstein, who needs no introduction. A. Philip Randolph, the founder of the first successful African-American labor union. Woody Guthrie, folk singer. Walter Reuther, the leader of the United Auto Workers. Betty Friedan, co-founder of the National Organization for Women, and even Martin Luther King, towards the end of his life, considered himself a socialist. Now, in less than 5 minutes, I'm going to quickly sketch out a very brief history of socialism in the US. I think you could say that socialism has always been part of the culture in the US, because even in the early days of the New Republic, there were these what are sometimes called religious communist utopian communities, like the Oneida community. The Shakers were religious communists. And so from the very beginning, from the very founding of this country, there were socialists on American soil. In 1848, a number of European socialists, especially from Germany and German-speaking countries, fled from Europe after the failed revolutions there to the US, and became very active and became leaders in the abolitionist movement and leaders in the nascent labor movement. As I sort of alluded to before, the labor activists who began the fight for the 8-hour workday all considered themselves socialists. And of course, it's important that we're here in Chicago. The movement for the 8-hour workday begins here in Chicago, right? It begins with a general strike here in Chicago that was led by people who consider themselves socialists, some of whom also consider themselves anarchists. Okay, but the heyday of sort of organized political socialism in the US, I think, can be traced back to the very early part of the 20th century. That is the heyday of the Socialist Party. The Socialist Party was a viable political party in the early 20th century. They did succeed in electing 2 members of Congress, Victor Berger from Milwaukee, and Meyer Landon from New York City, from the Lower East Side of New York. Socialist Party presidential candidate Eugene V. Debs got 900,000 votes, which at the time was 6% of the presidential vote in the 1912 election. Besides these high-profile candidates, socialists managed to elect hundreds of state legislators, mayors, city council members, and other local officials, especially in the upper Midwest. In Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota. And they usually ran on a platform of what was called street and sewer socialism, that they were going to clean up the garbage in the streets, they were going to improve, they were going to create public utilities that were publicly owned, they were going to create parks for kids to play in, and so on. The socialist movement of the Socialist Party was so popular that they had a national newspaper based in, of all places, Girard, Kansas, called The Appeal to Reason, that had a circulation of 500,000. And it's also important to note, I've been including illustrations from the Chicago Daily Socialist on my slides, that Chicago had a daily socialist newspaper for 5 or 6 years. And in 1912, thanks to a printer's strike, it became the highest circulation newspaper in Chicago for a few brief months, because no other paper was getting printed. So the Chicago Daily Socialist was the highest circulation newspaper. Now, the socialist, and I could go on and on about some of the people affiliated with the Socialist Party. Upton Sinclair ran for governor of New York in California in the 1930s. He was a socialist. He had run as a socialist for Congress twice. He switched his affiliation to Democrat and managed to get 37.8% of the vote, which was the highest percentage a Democrat had ever gotten in California at that point in 1934 as part of his epic campaign, the End Poverty in California, campaign. So the Socialist Party sort of collapsed in 1920, and part of the reason it collapsed is because of the split that took place between the Socialist Party and the Communists. Thanks to the successful Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, a number of socialists were inspired to split off and form a Bolshevik-style communist party in the United States. And of course, a lot of socialist members defected to the what was called, the Communist Party USA, or the CP, but several of them remained socialists. Okay, and the CP, although it was taking orders from Moscow and was a fairly authoritarian and hierarchical organization that had all sorts of problems, the CP nevertheless played a very leading role in the labor struggles of the 1930s. They were central to the formation of the militant industrial labor unions that were associated with the CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations. They were also leaders in the campaign for the rights of the unemployed during the Great Depression, and for campaigns for the rights of civil rights of African Americans. And their membership peaked at about 55,000. And then, of course, went into a tailspin, in part because of McCarthyism and the Cold War, but in part because of their own stupidity. That's my own editorial opinion. Okay. But socialism did not disappear with the collapse of the Communist Party in the 1950s in this country, because of the collapse of the Communist Party in the 1950s, because socialists played a leading role, and socialist ideas played a leading role in both the civil rights movement and the New Left of the 1950s and 1960s. So, for example, socialist pacifist Bayard Rustin, who's a key advisor to Martin Luther King, and he was a central organizer of the March on Washington and was instrumental in a lot of other civil rights actions. And he was a socialist. He considered himself a socialist pacifist. And then, of course, the Students for a Democratic Society were strongly influenced by socialist ideas. Their statement of their program, the Port Huron Statement, reflects that. And those students who were associated with SDS became a major force in the civil rights, anti-war, and women's rights activism of the 1960s and 70s. So socialism didn't disappear with the decline of the Communist Party in the 1950s. All right, I want to wrap up here because I know I'm getting to over time. So I want to just touch on what I think is driving the resurgence of interest in socialism today, and then I'm going to pass it off to Jem, who can speak directly to why young people are so interested in socialism today. One thing I think that is clearly paved the way for this resurgence is, in fact, the collapse of the Soviet Union, which was a bad example of socialism, and the end of the Cold War. I think it used to be that to call somebody a communist was the ultimate epithet to brand them with, but I can tell you that the students that I have in my classes have no conception of what the Soviet Union was or what a communist is. And so it's no longer as effective, right, at discrediting progressive activists to call them communists. I think objective socioeconomic realities play a big role, right? We have seen since the 1980s the offshoring of a lot of our manufacturing. We've seen a steady erosion of labor rights and a decline in membership in labor unions. We've seen a stagnation in real wages, a dramatic, unprecedented polarization of wealth and of income, and an explosion in the levels of student debt, and serious, outrageous inflation in the cost of healthcare, both insurance and pharmaceuticals and housing, right? I think also playing a role is growing frustration, I think in particular among young people, with the dysfunction and corruption of the US political system, right? People who were in college in the 1990s and sort of becoming adults in the 2000s have witnessed 2 presidential elections captured by people who did not win the popular vote. And in 2016, Trump was elected president after losing by 3 million votes to Hillary Clinton. They have witnessed systematic Republican voter suppression. They have seen the growing influence of big money on our elections, especially after Citizens United, which just sort of opened the floodgates for dark money to flood into elections. They have also seen the continued federal government spending on war, right? Think about the Iraq War, where we spent, according to some estimates, $1 trillion on that conflict, on the prison industrial complex, and on bailouts for big business, right? As happened in 2008 and 2009, rather than spending on social needs. I think all of that has played a role. And then finally, there have been recent political developments, and I know Jem is going to talk about these, so I'll just mention them. The movement against the Iraq War, Occupy Wall Street, which nobody expected, which put class and class conflict back on the national political agenda, and of course, Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign. I think all of these things are helping to kindle interest in socialism today, and that is where I'm going to stop. So I'm going to stop sharing, and you can hand it over to Jem.
Bev, you're muted.
Go ahead, Jem.
I'm just, let me find Jim. Where is Jim? Jim, I can't find Jim. Where is he?
He's right here.
Do you want to say
I
something,
don't-
Jem?
I don't see you on my screen.
How about now? Does that help?
Yes, now I see you. Thank you very much. All right, and you're now the host, and we can share your screen. Thank you.
Okay, there's a couple people in the waiting room. Can I just let them in?
That'd be good.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay. How am I doing? Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, very good. It said my internet connection was unstable. Sorry about that. Okay. So I'd like to start off by thanking everybody for being here and coming out. Thank you for inviting me to give my talk. Give me a second. Another person is coming in. Wonderful. And so I'm going to be presenting. I'm pretty much going to pick up the baton from Dr. Macek's talk and continue forward and really discuss why there is a resurgence of socialism in the United States, because we did from his talk see this birth of socialism in the United States. And I want to continue forward and really go more in depth for why young people such as myself are interested in bringing back socialism into politics and into mainstream politics. So let's begin with the title slide here. Everybody can see it, right? The S word. Why are young people socialist? Well, the first thing we're going to have to do is figure out whether or not this claim is true, right? Otherwise, because I'm kind of, it's a complex question here. It's asking us, it's assuming that young people are socialists. So let's first examine that question. First, up here, I have generational trends. If you look all the way to the right on your screen, the right quadrant, there is Gallup poll had run in 2019 a poll on baby boomers and traditionalists, seeing that 68% were positive had positive views of capitalism, whereas 32% had positive views of socialism. The middle quadrant demonstrates Gen Xers, the generation after them, 61% in favor of capitalism, a slight decline, whereas 39% a slight increase that had a positive view of socialism. And the main takeaway here is looking at the third and final quadrant on the left, where it demonstrates millennials and Gen Zers are bridging the gap between this favorability of socialism and also declining favorability of capitalism, just in general discourse and what they like. So it's true. There is a general tendency for younger people to be more in favor of socialism. But the other thing that this graph shows us is that this change is pretty drastic if you look at it from Gen Xers, baby boomers to millennials. And furthermore, I don't want to discredit the wonderful Gen Xers and baby boomers who were socialists this whole time. We got to give them all credit, right? We can't just assume the young people, because they have been consistent throughout this whole time. But if we continue and take a step back, just one step backwards, we see in party trends, the Democratic favorability towards socialism has increased in the last decade by over this 10-point margin, according to Gallup polls, and decreased among Republicans by another 10 points. So we're seeing a general takeaway here that the left, as a whole, liberals, socialists, there are a trend towards socialism and it being more favorable in discourse. And what is the reason why? Well, one reason that we can point to, and the media points to, and we often point to, is 2016. Bernie Sanders brought in a revolution. His platform: universal health care, free affordable public college, green energy, raising the minimum wage, raising taxes on the 1%, ending wars and reducing military spending, legalizing marijuana. This was the platform of Sanders, and he brought about a interesting revolution, right? And what did we see afterwards? This increasing popularity of Bernie Sanders among voters. So after the 2016 election, we saw national adults were generally favorable and had a positive view, according to Gallup, that there were more positive takes on Bernie Sanders and his movement. And so the revolution continued. Though it failed in 2016, it continues with the same platform in 2020. And many people have attributed this, again, if we look at in 2019, popularity was on Bernie Sanders' side. He was quite the favorable Democratic frontrunner, and it doesn't necessarily work out. But the general trend I want to demonstrate is the popularity of Sanders in the United States as a whole, not just young people, and then ask ourselves exactly why Bernie Sanders has been the face of socialism. Because what I've seen online, and I've followed and watched a bunch of Fox News segments to really see what the conservative side is bringing to the table argumentative-wise, and let's just go through some of the arguments that I've seen from Fox. Young people are emotionally swept up by socialism without understanding the real world. Young people are susceptible to communists like Sanders, who promise them free things so they can be lazy. And young people feel the world owes them something. Now, clearly, these are interesting, to say the least, arguments from Fox. But what I really want to highlight here is it's not too crazy to think some of these arguments if you're more conservative, if you view history in a vacuum. And I just want to take a quick short stop here and argue against viewing history in a vacuum. There is a popular theory that historians have disputed, this idea of great man theory, where the history of ideas and history as itself moves from leaders of great men to the next great man. And this is clearly a fallacious, way to examine history. And we must reject viewing history through a vacuum because it doesn't really explain why Bernie Sanders was picked up by young people. It's not Bernie Sanders that was, lulling a bunch of young people, but it was young people championing, older people to young people and older people championing Bernie Sanders that brings him to the forefront. So let's begin with myth number one. Socialism is popular because of Bernie Sanders. This is a myth. Because the biggest thing we have to, and I will get to this more in the latter half of my presentation. First, Sanders's popularity is very difficult to actually understand if you only view him if you view him through this vacuum and you see his popularity amongst young people. It doesn't make sense. He's an old man. Why is he getting why is he so popular amongst young people? And furthermore, another thing that I've noticed is that the media equivocates Sandersism with socialism, that every type of prospective socialism has to be filtered through the lens of Bernie Sanders because of these election cycles. We have to dispel this myth because we can't understand why young people are championing Bernie Sanders. It is vice versa. It is not Bernie Sanders that's forward. It's the people that are championing him. And why are they doing that? Now let's go to myth number 2. Young people are inherently left-wing. This is a pretty popular argument. I see this from all sides of the political spectrum. But I want to argue today that this is sort of a myth, even though we have seen general trends towards young people being more left-wing. First rebuttal I may hear from one of you will be, look at the slide before, Jem. You just told us young people were going towards the left, right? They found that to be the popular position. But I want to rebuke that argument by demonstrating giving you a couple of examples. My first example will be young people voting in neoliberalism in the United States in the 1980s. Ronald Reagan, one of the most famous presidents, Make America Great Again, came from him, right? This is the birth of kind of what we're also seeing in the United States today under Trump. Here it begins, right? Ronald Reagan, and he brings in neoliberalism. Another example we can see in the 80s was in the United Kingdom, where young people voted in neoliberalism again with Margaret Thatcher. My point here is remember the yuppies. The yuppies were young, upperly mobile professionals. And something to keep in mind here is Ronald Reagan in the election cycle against Carter was able to tie Carter on youth popularity and win all of the other voting populations that were necessary for him to secure the election. The second example here is Thatcher, who did the same thing as Reagan twice, where she was able to tie or break even with young candidates and win all the other electoral categories they needed to win. And here's a very interesting slogan I want people to take away from this. Thatcher's famous slogan, "There is no alternative." When I say neoliberalism, I mean it is a form of capitalism that we saw develop after the famous socially democratic Keynesian model that the United States adopted, where we gave more, we had more public, government had more control over private companies under neoliberalism. When Dr. Macek was talking in the latter half of his presentation, when he's talking about ending labor rights since the 80s and outsourcing production, he's talking about this neoliberalism where we've adopted a model of, focusing on sending labor to cheaper areas, and in many ways infiltrating other countries' governments, assassinating leaders to put neoliberalism in command of their countries. And so Thatcher's big claim was there is no other alternative to neoliberalism. But what I want everybody to take away here is especially this idea that young people are not inherently left-wing, because we saw young people challenge this narrative in the 80s when they adopted in neoliberal reforms and voted in Republican conservative ideology into the presidency and other offices. So let's move on to the big question then, Jem. You've spent 10 minutes going over this. Why are young people socialists today? Well, there's 2 reasons. The first, I would say, is they're facing an existential diminishing quality of life. And second, that young people are uniquely rejecting this conception of the end of history. By the end of history, I mean this idea that there's no other alternative. In the 90s, there were theorists like this guy named Fukuyama who said that history has come to a close. Capitalism has won political economic development after the Soviet Union fell, and that we are facing the end of history. And young people are in a unique position to dispel this notion. First, I want to bring to the forefront the most existential issue for young people is climate change, because climate change is not something that can be fixed under our current state and model. Climate change is an existential threat to us because we talk about having a decreasing amount of children, and children are, and there are other economic reasons for this, but why bring a kid into a world if you know it's going to fall to climate catastrophe? And the other issue here is that capitalists are not motivated to genuinely fight climate change. You may see notions from big organizations saying you should recycle, you should do this, putting the onus on us, but young people are uniquely rejecting this notion, saying, sure, recycling is good on my behalf, but look at the majority of the destruction coming. Where does that come from? And it comes from big capitalists polluting the environment, and they want to challenge the main source of this of the issue, and they want to fight for climate change. This is one of the largest pressing things for our future. Another example we can go to is the fight for college. There is an increasing cost of college that we've seen. I mean, the chart is a little hard to read here, but basically it hasn't adjusted with inflation. Students are finding it incredibly difficult to go to college without receiving massive amounts of debt that keeps them tethered to a non-upwardly mobile society. So let's pause here for a second and talk about the 80s again. When Gen Xers voted in Margaret Thatcher and voted in Ronald Reagan, they experienced the benefits from this Keynesian, more social democratic model and tried to create this more individualist and beautiful, privatized new economic system to vote in Reagan. But what happened here is that there was increasing costs of education, and in general, there's no social mobility that previous generations have seen. This is the death of the American dream for the white middle class. Other classes are often forgotten of, right? They didn't have that same type of mobility, but really we don't have that same type of social mobility that older generations have seen. And so the fight for college is one that is key here because it keeps us tethered to having to pay off ridiculous financial debts that will keep accruing throughout our entire lifetimes. The next example here, which is really important, is the fight for universal healthcare. In the United States, our healthcare is tied to our employers. This puts us at a big disadvantage if after I graduate from college with debt, I can't find an employer that's going to help pay for my healthcare and help me out. That keeps me stagnated in a lifestyle that I'm not going to be able to get out of debt from. And so a famous Harvard study in 2009, it's a little old. Remember, the numbers have only gone up. 45,000 Americans die per year due to a lack of health insurance. This was accepted across the board. This was from Harvard in 2009. In 2018, we saw 27.8 million Americans without health insurance. This is pre-COVID. If you include the millions of people that have lost their jobs are attached to their healthcare. And I'm right now working on some stories about wildcat strikes that have happened throughout the United States. One of the primary reasons that there are increasing strikes in the United States over the last year amongst workers are because jobs are trying to cut their payment towards healthcare. They don't want to pay and help, they want to decrease the amount of help they're giving their employers and benefits for healthcare. Furthermore, the COVID cases, as we've seen, it points to another existential threat. Over 500,000 people in the United States died up to date due to COVID. I mean, this clearly puts to challenge the system that we have, and young people, especially because they don't have inadequate access to healthcare, want to fight for this as a human right. And really, only socialism and a collective form of action can fight against capitalist interests, where we have a privatized healthcare system that prevents people from literally living, right? And if we wanted to make a constitutional argument here, there are some, we're supposed to be guaranteed by our government our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. They're clearly not doing that if they're tethering us to the market where not everybody's guaranteed a job and therefore not guaranteed healthcare. The fight against endless wars, this is incredibly important. Dr. Macek talked about this during the latter half of his presentation again. And since the Iraq War, we've seen an endless amount of wars. My generation was born into wars, and it never ends. Obama promised that he was going to end the wars. And when he left office, he was drone striking 8 countries. Clearly, he did not fulfill his promises of fighting the endless wars. And what we've seen consistently is an increase from our government into the military spending and defense budget to a degree where it's just absolutely unnecessary. And some arguments have been made that the United States spent so many of its resources on military spending instead of social democratic examples from like the Nordic countries that have put their resources into social, programs. We put them into the military to police the world. And I have a couple of other examples here about our increasing tensions with the Middle East, especially like Iran and then also China, which also, is concerning if we're talking about ending the wars. Furthermore, another example alluded to prior was the great crash of 2008, where the famous slogan that you can see on the left side here is "Banks got bailed out, we got sold out." Another famous slogan that came from the Occupy movement was this idea of the 1% having and maintaining power. So to bring it back to that Sanders point I made, one of the biggest arguments from Sanders is we got to tax the 1%. Well, if we look at Sanders saying that in a vacuum, that doesn't necessarily make complete sense. Yeah, let's tax the 1%, but where does that come from? That directly comes from Occupy in many ways. And it is a slogan that has continued itself, and we're seeing it raise in popularity. So we can't just view it in isolation. I have a couple more slides here and then I'll be done. The stagnation of wages, when young people aren't guaranteed great jobs and we're also guaranteed $7 as minimum wage, right? That also is a huge concern for us. And we want to increase minimum wage because of how dangerous it is for our lives, because we can't really sustain ourselves. And then furthermore, what we saw, and I have to bring this up, last year in 2020, this demands for racial justice, right? Socialists are are directing and leading in command Black Lives Matter movements and also just general movements for racial equality, right? And they are doing so with a legitimate concern against our police state that never went away, that is constantly being funded. And one example here I have to make it really hit home is our state, just the city of Chicago has a military budget of $1.76 billion. That's not Illinois. That's just Chicago. It's absolutely insane. And so one of the things that young people prioritize here is we have to challenge our conception of the prison system. We have to challenge our conception of the justice system, and we have to change it. Furthermore, the last thing here I do want to bring up, because my slide got cut out, is immigration. Immigration reform is especially important for young people as well. I had a whole slide here with some statistics. It's missing right now, but young people are incredibly, they find it incredibly important to fight for, immigrant rights in the United States. And we really can't forget that component of it. There are a diverse young population, unlike ever before, that are willing and want to fight for their political rights. And so let's finally get here, a new hope, the squad, right? The famous squad that we've been given. So Jem, it's not just Sanders, there's the squad. Yeah, we have some progressive Democrats, and they do have more diversity than we've ever seen before in Congress. Furthermore, they do speak to these systemic issues that young people are interested in solving. But are the progressive Democrats enough? Well, for me, and I think we can talk about this in questions, but the answer is absolutely not. Because there are two ways we can challenge the political system, the system of capitalism that we're living in. The first way is obviously through politics, but the second needs to be an independent politics, a labor organizing, unions to directly challenge the capitalist class, which really controls our government, not just politicians, because capitalists are ones that are funding these systems, as Dr. Macek alluded to earlier. Citizens United. So there it's a two-pronged attack that we really have to go for. One more person's coming in. Okay, last slide here. The three takeaways from my presentation are: first, socialism without Sanders. Do not view socialism in just this vacuum of Bernie Sanders, because there's so much more for why young people have championed Sanders specifically to pass this baton of socialism. The second here is the myth of young socialism. Yes, younger people now are socialist, but that's because we are responding to the capitalist crisis that has insistently been given to us in a world we were born to that we didn't consent to. And finally, the diminishing quality of life. All of the examples I just went over are perfect reasons for why young people would champion a socialist slogan, because capitalist interests, private interests, do not care for the masses. The masses must lead and care for themselves. There's a famous quote by one of my favorite socialists named Rosa Luxemburg. And her question, or the question I leave you everyone with, is socialism or barbarism? Meaning we have to go down a socialist path for more democracy, more rights, to increase this quality of life for all working people throughout the world, and challenge this conception and further save ourselves from barbarism. That is my talk. Thank you. I will be giving a hostship in 1 second.
All right. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, so we have questions coming up now, and let me look in the chat and see if anybody, we have a few questions that were put out beforehand, but before we even get to those, I want to thank Professor Macek and Jim. That was phenomenal. A look back at the history of socialism in our nation, as well as what is driving the young people today back toward socialist ideas. And that was excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, so now I'm looking to see if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I see good comments and much praise for our speakers here. One is, okay, the right wing, this is, I think it's from John DeCanto, but anyway, the right wing mantra is socialism has never worked anywhere in the world. Is there a quick rebuttal to that? Steve, you're muted, so unmute yourself.
Okay, I think there is a quick rebuttal, which is, to go back to those policies that I mentioned that socialists have always advocated for. Is free K through 12 education a failure? Is Social Security, which has pulled, it used to be in this country, since my first book was on representations of poverty, I happen to know a little bit about this. It used to be in this country that to grow old was to be condemned to poverty. If you made it to 65, you were very likely to be poor. Over 50% of older Americans used to be, people 65 years of age or older used to be poor. Social Security, which was inspired by socialist ideas, and FDR took it over from socialists, pulled old people out of poverty. And now we have this problem in the United States where to be young is to be poor, where 1 in 5 children in the United States is poor. So my response would be, yeah, there's plenty of socialist policies that have been enormously successful. And I also think that the quality of life in a number of countries that we might identify as social democracies that have a mixed economy is far superior to the quality of life that we have here in the United States, because people are guaranteed a kind of basket of social goods. They don't have to worry about, if they get sick, whether that's going to bankrupt them, right? Because they have universal health care. Women who have children don't have to choose, right, between going to work and caring for their children, because there's free childcare, for example, in France. So, I would suggest that socialist policies have been enormously successful.
All right, there's another question in the chat from Beth Went, and so either of you would answer this, please. The co-ops that we see in rural America, are they born by socialism?
Very good question. Some of them are. So I have, so the one state in the union that has a publicly owned bank is, does anyone know? Anyone want to take a guess? North Dakota. And that was the achievement of the Nonpartisan League, which was a socialist hint. I mean, it came out of the populist movement, but many of the people who were populists in the late 19th century became socialists in the early 20th century. And so they were, it was a socialist idea. And so, yeah, a lot of those co-ops, not all of them, but a lot of those co-ops, were the result of a socialist style movement, like the nonpartisan movement in North Dakota.
All right, and this next question looks like it might be for Jim. with the trends with young people showing an interest in socialism and socialism ideas, do you think that, quote, it's only a matter of time, or is there still more work to be done within the younger generations before we see change?
Well, first, thank you so much for your question. Rain is a good friend of mine. Thank you for coming out and listening to us talk about socialism. I will take your question now. There's a lot to be done. That's a great question. What is to be done, right? Well, I think among young people, what needs to be done is look a little bit beyond just political electoralism, which is important to get ideas out there. I think we really need to focus on, bigger discussions on programs rather than, identities, and sometimes focusing on big key issues to rally up people. And I think sometimes the younger generation gets really focused online, and I would rather see a bigger push towards labor organizing. I don't notice, I mean, I can't speak for all young people here. I know there are a lot of great young people that do incredible work, but from what I can understand, because of the just pressing media controlled society we live in, where we're constantly seeing these media cycles, especially during election, we think elections are the most important thing. But if we really want to challenge power, it can't just be from election cycles. It has to come from labor organizing and helping workers and joining those movements as well, and really seeing ourselves as like one working class. And so I think that would be kind of one of the things I would say that young people need to do. Are we close to it? I don't think so. I don't think we're close to it. I think we are having a much, important and broader discussion that we haven't really seen in the last decade. I'm noticing a lot of younger people criticizing politicians from the past. I don't hear any young people talk good about Clinton during his administration. I don't hear any young people. I hear a lot less. I hear much less young people talking good about Obama, when you really see the bigger picture here and criticisms of our presidential candidates and also other electoral candidates that don't really fulfill the promises of social change that they proclaim they would do. And so, we need a lot more discourse and also more organizing, especially through labor.
Diane, do we have time for one more question?
We might have one more.
Okay. Is there a desire among young people to compete for leadership in the present political parties in order to effect change?
I'll quickly answer this, and Dr. Macek can, also give his ideas here. But there is a huge desire. I mean, the Justice Democrats I just pointed to in my last slide, those are all younger candidates that are championed by younger people to really present a political challenge. I would still lean towards the issues of that just through a political process. But yes, there are many young people running for smaller positions, especially post 2020 when Bernie lost the primary. We're noticing a lot of DSA organizations, the Democratic Socialists of America, and other political bodies really trying to bring younger candidates to the forefront. I think one of the examples is in this last week, Nevada. I think all of their election seats were won by Bernie Sanders, younger Bernie Sanders supporters in Nevada, and all of the pro-Hillary Democrats, just standard Democrats, quit their position. So there was some interesting movement we've seen of young people really, running for smaller seats in Nevada and other places.
I'll just, dovetail off of what Jem said. I mean, from my limited understanding, I think that there is some excitement among young people that's been generated by leaders like AOC and the Squad and Bernie Sanders, and we saw a record number of young people participate in this last political in the 2020 presidential election, and in the special runoff in Georgia. As I understand it, young people, especially activists connected to Black Lives Matter, were instrumental in organizing Get Out the Vote. So I think that there is some evidence that young people are interested in potentially contesting for party leadership and leading the party maybe in a more leftward socialist direction. So I want to thank you all for your attention. Thanks for your time. I know we've got candidates coming up, so I'm eager to hear from them. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to thank both Jem and Steve for saying yes when I called. It's so appreciated. And Jem, I especially appreciated your emphasis on labor unions. Some of you on this call know this, that I was president of the Naperville 203 Teachers Union for 9 years. And people would sometimes ask me, why are you involved in this labor union? And I'd say over 70% of us are women. We're still fighting for equal rights. We deal with children, not this nation's first priority, and we're paid with tax dollars. And there's a lot of hands out for those. That collective action was powerful and it made a difference. And you'll always find me in a labor camp. You know, that the collective action and speaking with a more powerful voice is important. One other thing, Steve, the millennial generation, not the millennial, well, yeah, I guess they're the millennials. My granddaughter's a millennial. They have greater numbers now than any other generation. They have the capacity to affect change if they collectively can bring themselves together, you know, for perspective perhaps. And the chart that Jem showed us where they're merging between capitalism and socialism and the greater approval rating that they've seen. I don't know where this will all lead, but it looks like it's got promise.
I agree. I would agree wholeheartedly. Yes, it's definitely got promise. And I hear it from my students, right? Like Jem, who was just my student last year. I hear it from my students.
Well, this is all wonderful. And we have so many on the call today, and I'm so pleased. I see Benny White has just joined us, Naperville City Councilman and candidate, but he's a sitting elected official as well. We may have others. Is John Crumman on the call yet? Not yet. Okay. I'm going to turn this over to Barb O'Mara. And Barb O'Mara is an elected official with the DuPage County Forest Preserve, District 5. And Beth Wendt, who are going to take turns calling out and introducing our various candidates. So Barb and Beth?
And just to follow up just a little bit on what we were just talking about, with the youth getting involved and getting elected, women stepped up from 2016 forward like we've never seen. And many of these grassroots organizations were led by women because we felt unheard. And tonight we've got a host of candidates who probably never imagined in 2016 they would run for office.
Barb, you got to go. Maybe because Beth is close.
Because of your thing. Yeah.
Okay, Beth, now you're better.
Now, thank you. So, yeah, so we get to start tonight with Lucy Chang Evans, who's running for Naperville City Council. And so, welcome.
Thank you. Oh, it's nice to go first. Usually I'm like second or third. But so I am Lucy Chang Evans, and I am running for Naperville City Council. The thing that people usually it sticks in their mind about me is the smallest part. I used to be a Secret Service agent. So usually after I say that, people just stop thinking and then they're like, what are you talking about? But so I was, but there's a lot more to me than that. I'm a licensed professional civil engineer. I'm a public servant. I worked for I've got 12 years of experience as an engineer in both the public and the private sector. And combined, I have 8 years of experience as a civil engineer and a Secret Service agent. So I'm running because I want my elected officials to make responsible decisions for people like me. I am a married mother of three. So my daughter goes to Naperville Central. My older son goes to Madison Junior High, Diane. And my younger son goes to Meadowglands. And so I got 3 kids in 3 schools. I'm juggling a lot, but I'm also a former stay-at-home mom. I spent 8 years raising my kids at home. 2 of those years were actually just me being a stay-at-home wife. But and then I'm a former single mom. I got hit in the face with a divorce that I didn't see coming. So I know what the struggle is with trying to raise children and trying to put everybody in school and trying to get my act together and get back into the workforce, which I was able to do. I want to build a sustainable Naperville. So I love Steve and Jem, this was perfect for me, this presentation. I want to build a sustainable Naperville, and I want to focus on the triple bottom line, which is people, planet, and prosperity. all people have a right to feel safe, included, and accepted. Our planet, obviously, we need some help. There's a lot that we can do still. We still have the power to turn things around. I, as a civil engineer, I used to work for DuPage County and a few different municipalities, but my wheelhouse is flood control, environmental mitigation, and I'm all about saving our wildlife habitat. And ironically, Naperville is one of the most prosperous communities in Illinois, and for us to be able to maintain our way of life, we have to change our way of life. There are changes coming that we don't want to see. You know, we're talking about, I loved, especially Jem, you're talking about labor, organizing. What's going to happen when, all the farm equipment picks all the fruit? The machines are going to take over. What's the labor force even going to do? So there's a lot of things, there's a lot of forward thinking that we need to do. So this is a different intro that I normally give, but it's because I just loved your topic so much. Socialism, the people, planet, and prosperity. You won't hear me call it socialism, but we all know what it is. But if you call it by what it is, it appeals to more people than the S word. So that's my spiel. You get what you vote for. So I hope everybody does your research on all the candidates, and I hope to earn your vote. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next we have, and thank you for that, Lucy. Next we have James Hasselhorst, who is running for Naperville City Council.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to speak to you tonight. And as introduced, I am running for Naperville City Council. I do have over 30 years of previous government management leadership experience. So I am very familiar with government organizations and their responsibility to their the people they serve. I'm also familiar with the Naperville city government. I've been participating in city council meetings and other boards and so forth for roughly 20 years, and addressing council on various issues. I also have been managing a small local business for the last 25 years, so I am familiar with our Naperville business community and the challenges that our government organizations present to those business communities. And then, of course, I've been doing volunteer work since shortly after first coming to Naperville. That's one of the things that really appealed to me most about Naperville, is all of the non-for-profits and volunteer work that goes on here. Within a few months, I became familiar with the Naperville JCs and started volunteering with them and helping out their organization. And that led to working with the Exchange Club, the Rotary, West Urban Irish, and several other organizations. This community gives a lot to its citizens, I think. We're very fortunate in many ways, and a lot of things our city provides us. And I've always felt that you don't just take, you got to give. So the reason I'm running is for the same reason I did all the volunteer work that I've done in the past, and the reason I've been involved with city council is because I'm just the way I've tried to give back to the community in the past. And now I feel that with all the things we've seen in the last couple of years, and the fact that find myself becoming more and more engaged with city government over the last couple of years, I just feel that I can give more back on city council than I've been able to do through the volunteer work and just engaging city council in the past. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on this and why I'm running. My website, napervillecandidate.com, provides a lot of information about me, my history, my background, as well as where I stand on some of the issues that have been discussed in previous meet and greets, as well as in this forum. And I'm still updating that every day. So please go there. You can learn a lot more about me from there, a lot more than I could probably tell you in a short time. Thanks for that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Excellent. And next up, we have Saba Haider running for District 204 School Board.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Indivisible Naperville, for this opportunity. I'm honored to be here. I'm learning so much from all of you, and I'm just so happy to be here. I'm Saba Haider, and I'm running for District 204 to help all students learn, lead, and thrive. I'm a wife and a mother to two beautiful and kind middle and elementary school kids. I got my citizenship in 2019, And after being a volunteer and fundraiser for over a decade, I decided this is a moment where I'm ready to give back in a bigger capacity. So Bill, to your question, whether more young people want to participate and affect change, I don't know what your definition of young is, but I'm going to say I'm young at heart. And yes, I'm trying to affect change in our community. I have a master's degree in wildlife science, and I've worked with various endangered species, protecting our endangered species and the environment. So when Jem was talking about the impact, the human impact on the environment and how we need to take charge, I've seen firsthand the human impact on animal migration, movement, and just how people, those who have the least amount of resources, are the most giving. When I would sit with them in the jungles working on an elephant corridor, I would find them to be most forgiving to these elephants who would trample their crops in the night, and they would just get up and say, what can I do? They're elephants. And I learned so much from them. After having kids, I started my business and immersed myself in my community service. I train people now to become wellness teachers. I provide consulting services to various corporate organizations. I also teach students of all ages the skills and tools to manage and improve their physical, emotional, and mental well-being. My mother, she's my mentor, and she runs a school for underprivileged kids. And working with her has given me the insight to inner workings of a school and how they are run. If elected, I will be an advocate for social, emotional, and mental health of our children, helping allocate resources to our students equitably and foster community collaboration and communication. My work in community service has given me the unique opportunity to teach and train kids and adults, from kindergartners to nonagenarians. I have worked with different groups of people from diverse backgrounds, socially, culturally, and economically. This experience of over a decade has given me the unique skills to be a patient listener, a collaborative leader, a creative thinker, and a problem solver. In this time of strong opinions, I want us to focus on the future. Yes, we are tired, but we cannot stop taking wise decisions now. Let us focus on reason and empathy. Let us look to the future and recommit to the students. Thank you for listening. My name is Sabah Heather, and I look forward to receiving your vote. I am number 6 on the ballot. Election is April 6th, but don't wait for April 6th. Go out and vote now. I'm number 6 on April 6th. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you, Saba. Our next candidate this evening is Christy Helm, who is running for District 2. Allison Wood at the beginning. Christy Helm for District 203 School Board.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Indivisible Naperville, for hosting this evening. Steve and Jem, thank you so much for your presentation as well. I found it very fascinating, especially as somebody that studied sociology in college. And really quick, to answer Bill's question, I think that was a great question about whether or not younger people are getting involved in politics. Me personally, I'm 29 years old. I'm a millennial. And while I've always wanted to run for school board, I definitely did not see myself being on a ballot before I turned 30, but I'm very excited to say that I am putting myself out there. So a little bit about me. Again, my name is Christy Helm. I moved to Naperville in June of 2017, and I moved here specifically for the schools. I'm a low-income single mom, and I've struggled to afford to live here. I have had to work multiple jobs to pay my rent in Naperville, but I thought it was worth it for the school district. My daughter, I can't give her everything that I always want to. However, the one thing that I can give her is the highest possible quality education, and nobody can take that away from her. I believe that a high quality education is absolutely critical for all of our kids. And so my daughter now is in 3rd grade at Elmwood, and I am extremely invested in the school district. In addition, in my professional life, again, as I had mentioned, I have my bachelor's degree in sociology from Northern Illinois University. I've worked as an elementary school teacher. I also worked in educational sales, in which I coordinated with district administration to negotiate contracts and orchestrating district-wide test preparation, as well as teacher professional development sessions. And most recently, prior to being laid off due to COVID, I was working as the manager of operations for an educational nonprofit organization. And I worked with schools to provide their students with programming about financial literacy, entrepreneurship skills, and work readiness. Should I be elected as a District 203 school board member, I have 3 top priorities. Number 1 is providing resources to all of our students and families, such as tutoring services, support groups, clubs and things like that, and also parental resources, especially for those that cannot afford the services in their regular life, I guess, outside of school. Number 2 is continuing District 203's mission of diversity and inclusion. So that includes, first of all, focusing and putting all of the attention on closing the achievement gap, and also continuing teacher training, such as implicit bias trainings and things like that. And then finally, number 3, I think it's important to focus on mental health services. So making sure that we have a proper ratio of students to staff members, and that our staff members are properly trained to assist kids on some of the traumas that they've gone through due to COVID-19. And making sure that all of the mental health services in our schools are easily accessible for all of our kids, to make sure that students feel comfortable seeking the help that they may need. I believe that my passion for education, as well as my experience, will allow me to be a very well-rounded school board member. And I look forward to your vote for Christy Helm on April 6th. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Christy. And next up, we have Amanda McMillan, and she's also running for District 203 School Board. Amanda?
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and it's so great to be here. I've really enjoyed the presentations tonight, and it's such an honor to be a guest here tonight. So as Barb said, my name is Amanda McMillan, and I'm a first-time candidate running for Naperville District 203 School Board. And I'm running for this position with 3 priorities in mind. First, I want to ensure our schools have the resources in place to reopen responsibly and safely for all. Second, I want District 203 to create an intentional and integrated diversity, equity, and inclusion plan throughout the entire district. And 3, I want to commit up to a fiscally responsible school board budget that ensures that students have the resources needed to match our technological, social, emotional, mental health, and curricular needs. My wife and I moved to Naperville 5 years ago so that our 3 beautiful children could attend the amazing schools in District 203. Currently, they're at Kingsley Elementary and Lincoln Junior High. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and for the past 15 years, I've been in nonprofit management, which means that my job is to come up with solution-oriented tactics to community issues. Currently, I'm part of an organization that has led a statewide effort to support youth-serving organizations to continue to provide mandatory services in the safest way possible throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Additionally, I am facilitating a diversity, equity, and inclusion process for our organization to ensure that all of our trainings, technical assistance, and advocacy work is meeting the needs of all stakeholders throughout the state. I have experience working with boards and understand the role to provide oversight to the superintendent by asking the important and difficult questions. If elected, I will commit to ethical and fiscal responsibility to all the taxpayer dollars. It's because of this personal connection and professional experience that I'm asking for your support and vote for the Naperville 203 School Board on or before April 6th. I'm number 3 on the ballot. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda, for that. And next this evening, we have Autumn Geist, who is running for Lisle Township Trustee.
Good evening, Indivisible DuPage. Thank you so much for having me. So excited to be here. I want to shout out to my fellow speech coaches. I'm a speech coach myself, a DGS alum. So nice to have another speaker on board. I have been a resident of Lisle for over 28 years. I am a mother, a widow. I have 3 children. Not so much children anymore. They're aged 19 to 32. And I am a business owner, a speech coach, and a community volunteer. I've been volunteering inside and outside of Lisle for over 25 years. Everything from tutoring youth in my younger years through Tri-County Urban Leagues to mentoring teen moms through Teen Parent Connection, raising funds for programs that support families and individuals from Project Help to NCO Youth and Family Services. I've been a little bit all over the place, raising money for our school, president of HSO, all kinds of hats. I'm not going to bore you with that, but just sharing those things with you so that you understand that intrinsically I have cared for people very deeply, and I've put myself out there over and over again in non-compensatory ways. And for me, as my youngest headed off to college last year, I recognized that I still had a lot of passion and a lot to give as a volunteer. And so I wanted to become involved in politics. And as I looked at the different roles where my passions and my interests lied, I felt that township programs and services were very much in line with what I'd already been doing for all these years, which was looking out for people in times of need and crisis. As a business owner, I've used my business as a conduit for collecting everything from items for period insecurity, diaper drives, coat drives, food drives. So again, this is not something that's new to me. Two of the things that are really important to me as I'm running for office are, one, community outreach. I really feel that there are so many people who have no idea what the township services and programs are. They don't understand, taxpayers don't understand what that line item is on their tax bill. I know this because every time I talk to people, 9.9 out of 10 times, that's a response that I receive. And then there's so many people who are in need of services that aren't aware that they exist as well. So I really want to be a real foot soldier for the township and really make sure that I'm connecting people to services, but also being a good steward of our taxpayers' tax dollars. Another thing that's really important to me is communication. I think that the website for township is very limited. It's difficult to navigate for somebody who's savvy with technology, let alone somebody who isn't. So I would really like to make that a focus, as well as getting out a maybe twice a year, a paper newsletter, and then maybe a monthly or quarterly digital newsletter, just depending on what's really needed. The more information that comes out, the more transparent you are with information, the more loyalty and trust that you have with your taxpayers. So, and lastly, I'll share this with you. Obviously, I'm a woman of color, and I think that it's very important that boards have diversity and reflect the communities that they serve. So thank you so much again for having me. Autumn Geis for Lisle Township.
All right, thanks, Autumn. And next, somebody who we appreciate very highly here at Indivisible Naperville, because we have drafted her to be on our leadership team. And I don't believe that she ever imagined she would be running for an elected position, but I'll let her deal with that. And this is Jean Page, who's running for Lisle Township trustee.
What Barb said, okay? Thank you, Indivisible Naperville, for hosting this tonight. I appreciate the opportunity, and the presentation was fantastic. I could listen to you forever. My name is Jean Page, and I'm running for Lisle Township trustee. Thank you truly for the opportunity to introduce myself. I've been a township resident for 30 years, at first in Lisle and currently living in Naperville with my husband and 2 grown sons. Besides raising my kids, I've spent the last 26 years as a volunteer, first in their schools, eventually expanding into the community. I began volunteering as a precinct committee woman during the 2017 municipal elections. My goal was then, and still is, to encourage my neighbors to get out and vote, impressing on them the importance of local elections. Currently, I work with a team of volunteers at the Lisle Township Food Pantry Vegetable Garden. The garden is all volunteer and everything we use is donated. The garden grows a variety of produce, which is donated to the food pantry, whose clients will have the opportunity then to choose from organically grown, freshly harvested produce, a shared community service effort. My involvement began teaching me about local government and what the township is. Until then, I didn't pay much attention to that line item on my property tax bill. I've since learned that it offers local community service programs that help every township resident, and that's the part I'm passionate about. Local elections put into place the very people who will make the decisions and set the policies which directly affect our everyday life, our schools, our parks, our city government. Lisle Township is where I live, shop, dine, and play. I need to know that the people we elect to public office want the same things that I do, which is what is best for our cities and towns and township. It's nice knowing that we live in a place where any one of us could suffer a job loss or a financial setback, and that we will be looked after and taken care of by our township services. As a Lisle Township trustee, my goal will be to unite residents with the programs offered by the township which best fit their needs. I'm humbly asking for your vote for me, Jean Page, along with my slate of incredible people. April 6th, it takes a township. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. And next this evening, we have Drew Bolda, who is also, Lisle Township Highway Commissioner. Thank you, Drew.
Hi, everybody. Hello, Naperville, Indivisible Naperville. Drew Bolda. I'm running for Lisle Township Highway Commissioner. And some of the duties and responsibilities of the Highway Commissioner are unincorporated road surfacing and repairs, brush clearing, brush pickup, coordinate with the civil engineer in the county on construction, and prepare the budget and set the tax levy that shows up on your property tax bill. So if you want to know where that number comes from, it comes from the Highway Commissioner. So my core values that I bring to every endeavor I undertake are going to be integrity, transparency, and efficiency. My background is engineering. I have a degree in chemical engineering, and I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Illinois. And I've got about 30 years of experience working on projects large and small, lasting anywhere from 1 week to 2 years in several countries. And I intend to bring that, as well as my passion for local activity, to this endeavor. Some of the activities I've done locally, I've been a lifelong resident of the Chicago area, but only in Lisle Township for 13 years. So some of my activities have included mentoring through a Big Brother, Big Sister like program, tutoring math, chemistry, and physics at a community college, working at DuPage Pads, and a lot of the political activity I've done, especially since 2016. So that is what I bring to the table, what the job is. And it's something which is a high match for my skill set of engineering. And please vote Drew Bolda on April 6th. It takes a township, and we're planning on having the whole township be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. And that completes our Lisle Township slate there. Is Eddie Bedford here, Diane?
I haven't seen him yet. Eddie, are you here? I don't think he made it, but we have Anita here.
All right, then we'll go to our last candidate in Wheatland Township for Wheatland Township Clerk, Anita Liskey.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Indivisible Naperville. Can you guys hear me? You can hear me, right? Hi. Thanks so much for having me. I so enjoyed the presentations. I work in finance. My son graduated University of Chicago as an anthropology major. We have some kind of amazing conversations. I was taking notes the whole way. I can't wait for our next argument. Anyway, just to tell you a little bit about myself, I am absolutely one of those people that you referenced that in 2016 would have never imagined myself running, ever. Never crossed my mind. I have been a 20-year resident of Naperville. During that time, I've been a working mom. I've commuted down to Chicago, darn near every day for all of those 20 years. And there's absolutely no reason that I would have done that, except that I really, really love this community. I raised 2 sons here, my husband and I, and quite frankly, I wouldn't have been able to do it without the community that is Wheatland Township and Naperville. And I so appreciate it. And I appreciated it every day on that train. And now that my youngest son, as of last week I moved him to his apartment in Colorado. He took a job in Denver. Up to that day, I have benefited from the people here and the services here and the programs here. And now that my son is gone, I have time and I want to give back. I couldn't say it better than Hillary Clinton did. It really takes a village. And now I'm in a position to be part of the village to support people like me, to make sure that they have the support that they can achieve their dreams, whatever those may be. As I mentioned, professionally, my background is marketing and communications, pretty much always in financial services. I've actually worked not in government, but with government. I work with our government relations division. I do issues management. I can work an issue. I know how to work around DC. I'm excited to bring those skills to the local level. I really think it's at the local level that local government makes the most impact on people's lives. And I think I think it was Amanda that said, there's a real opportunity to educate our constituents about what township government, first of all, what township is, let alone what, township government is and could be and what they should turn to it for. I think my background really lends itself to getting involved with Wheatland and developing just kind of a grassroots education marketing campaign to make sure that our community has the information about what they should be expecting from township. And then on a regular basis, communicating out to them and reporting on what we do and ensuring there's accountability and frankly appreciation and, usage and hopefully, more and better programming as we go. So I couldn't be more excited to be getting I call it actively involved. I've always been involved, but getting active. And I really hope you'll vote for me. And it's, again, a super pleasure to be here tonight. And thanks for listening to my spiel, especially since I am the last one on the docket.
No, that's fine. And Indivisible Naperville appreciates each and every one of you that show up to our meetings to help put yourselves out there and educate the voters. And that's part of what we're doing here. Indivisible Naperville is about educating people, educating the voters. And that's why these presentations like we had tonight are so important. And we also want to give a platform to people that are running for office. So, Diane?
Yep, and I'm going to say one thing before I turn it over to Nancy. I don't know that everyone appreciates the 4 townships that feed into Naperville. Lisle Township is almost everything east of Washington Street, and it's a good chunk of Naperville. And then Naperville Township kind of goes west from Washington. And then south of 87th is Wheatland Township. And then where Nancy lives actually is DuPage Township, and that's southeast as well. But there isn't much of DuPage Township in Naperville, but there's a little. So we've got 3 big townships that feed into Naperville. So when they say Lisle Township, they're not talking city of Lisle. They're talking still a good, some of them live in Lisle, but a lot of them live in Naperville. So, township borders and the city borders are all kind of merged together. Just know that the townships, 4 of them feed into Naperville. So you'll see those like Wheatland and Naperville and Lisle Township, these all, and DuPage Township, they all feed into Naperville. So that's just a little information on where the candidates come from. Nancy, you're going to conclude the meeting?
Okay, well, thanks, Diane. And first, I'd like to thank everyone who attended. I'd like to thank our presenters. That was a fascinating presentation. And I love hearing from candidates. I'm always so impressed with the high quality of candidates that we're fortunate to have in Naperville. And I want to share with everyone, our next meeting will be on April 20th. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and Indivisible Naperville will present a panel discussion entitled Sexual Assault in Your Community. The speakers will include Will County State's Attorney Marie Check, Colleen Zavodny, Rape Crisis Center Coordinator, the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago, Madeline Thompson, law student, she will share a personal account, Carrie O'Connor, Sexual Assault Nurse Evaluator for Edward Elmhurst Hospitals, State Representative Maura Hirschauer of the 49th District, and Laura Welch, who is a Naperville resident in my township, DuPage Township, and she's the president, the current president of Illinois Now.
So that will be April 20th. You'll see notices on Facebook. We'll send out some emails. And for Indivisible Naperville, I want to thank everyone once again for attending, and I want to wish all of the candidates good luck. And I know I did see Dr. Benny White on here. He's also a candidate running for re-election to Naperville City Council. So I don't see him right here on my screen. Maybe he's on another screen or left, but
Benny had to hop off. This is Judy talking, and I think I see Kim still on. I don't know if she wants to say something. Benny's better half, and I know his info is also in the chat.
All right, well then, I think that's it. So we'll say good night, everyone. Oh, hi, Kim.
I was gonna say, thanks Judy for the compliment. I am his better half, but yeah, he actually had to pop off. I'm so sorry. He had to go drop off some literature to someone, but you can look him up on bennywhite.org and find out all you need to find out about him.
And we've got a sign delivery event, don't we?
We do. We have a sign delivery event on Sunday. We're going to be meeting in the parking lot at Indian Harvest. And today he got the chamber endorsement, so he's super excited about that.
Nice.
So thank you all.
And thank you everyone for attending, and to Bev George for hosting our call tonight, and for all the Indivisible leaders, thank you very much. And to the candidates, as Nancy said, good luck. We're on the home stretch now, less than a month. Okay, we're
Good
going to
night.